and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs.
Welcome back, everyone, to Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs. I'm Jamie Franklin. I'm joined today by another vicar, for I too am a vicar, Thomas Pelham. Tom, we've been talking for ages, so it sort of seems slightly artificial to ask you how you are.
So, yeah, I'm all right, thanks. We should do a shout out to Daniel, shouldn't we? Who was Daniel, you know, the other one.
The other vicar who helps with this podcast.
Yeah, chaplain now, indeed, not vicar. Whoa.
Not a vicar anymore.
Not a vicar.
Okay. Still ordained.
I'm not saying he's not
still a priest.
Yeah.
Yes, but
not a
parish priest anymore.
Not a parish priest anymore. He's
the chaplain at Greenwich University.
It's University of Kent combined with the University of Greenwich.
Well, that's just happened. So I went to the University of Kent.
Did you go to?
Yeah, I did my undergraduate and my first master's degree at the University of Kent. And now it's been subsumed. They call it a merger, but everybody knows that the University of Greenwich has swallowed it up like a big hungry cookie monster. Wow. And now it's part of the wonderfully named London and South East Group. I think that's what it's called. London South East.
A lovely name for a university.
How imaginative.
Why don't they just, why can't they? They should have just gone for something, at least, when they were naming the secular colleges in Oxford or Cambridge.
Yeah.
They sort of chose interesting names, rather than kind of just, gone old school,
didn't they? Yeah.
They could have just gone St. Augustine University after the first St. Augustine.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to see what kind of links them together. I mean, apart from financial interests, like
vaguely in the southeast.
Yeah, one's in London, one's in the coast.
Anyway, Daniel is now the chaplain there, lead chaplain, and he was licensed on Monday, I think.
Yeah,
I wasn't able to get there.
And then neither was I. I saw the photos; they look good.
So congratulations to him.
Yeah, well done, Daniel. Hope it goes well. Do pray for Daniel in his new post.
Might actually go and see him because I always just sort of assumed that he was so far away.
He is far away. Yeah,
he was not anymore.
Now
he's just a train ride away. I can go.
Yeah, I'm an hour away now.
I can have a coffee with Daniel almost whenever I want.
Yeah, we could actually seriously think about doing the occasional in-person recording, couldn't we? Yeah. With all three of us, that could actually work.
Nip into London, yeah.
And we could get like guests in and set up a studio.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, he'd love the podcast.
Aim high. Yeah.
He'd love to come on. I'd love to get.
We actually, talking of guests, we want to thank Lord Frost, don't we? And we want to thank those who came to it. That's one of the things. It says notices. Thanks for Frost event.
Thanks for Frost. Yeah, we did a live interview. I interviewed Lord Frost, David Frost, on Thursday evening last week here in Winchester, the Church of Winchester, Holy Trinity Church Winchester, and it was really great. It's really just David, as he allows me to call him. He's a very humble guy, but also very deep. I thought he gave excellent answers to my questions, covered all sorts of things. Particularly interesting, I thought, was talking about his conversion to Roman Catholicism, which was really a conversion to Christianity.
Because he was sort of on the when we interviewed him back 2.5 years ago, he wasn't really identifying as a Christian as such.
No, not really, and he wasn't going to church or anything. So that is a big change, and it's the first time he's spoken about that in public.
Well, congratulations.
So that's great, and it was a very wide-ranging interview, as I'm sure you can imagine. Really, really good Q&A time with the people who were there at the end, which is all on the podcast. So if you haven't listened to that yet or watched it, please.
Is that free or is it to pay for?
No, it's all out there. It's all free.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. Of course, if you want to pay for our podcast, we have a Patreon.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
You can pay, and you can get our Uncollared. We had a wonderful Uncollared.
Very low prices to support this podcast, which is very necessary. So go to irreverentpod.com if you'd like to get our special bonus podcast. And if you'd like to get the episodes early, that would be really good. I'll do another plug for that later on.
I just thought I'd get in there. It seemed thematic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so today, Tom, I think we're going to talk about some news stories hopefully from a sort of vaguely Christian perspective, because we are sort of Christian vicars.
Vaguely Christian.
Vaguely Christian. So, but I thought we will start with the Bible reading.
We'll start with the Lord's Prayer. Should we start with the Lord's Prayer, Jamie?
Start with the Lord's Prayer, and then we're going to read from Matthew 18. So why don't you start with the Lord's Prayer, and then I'll do the reading.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen. You've stopped doing your sort of humorous variations on the Lord's Prayer, Tom.
It's never humorous.
More serious in your old age.
I just remembered it now.
Yeah, you've memorized it. Finally memorized the Lord's Prayer.
Finally memorized the Lord's Prayer. Yeah, it's a problem.
Okay, right. Should we do this?
It's all stage fright. It's stage fright. It's because I'm comfortable with my role now.
It's only taken 5 years.
Yeah.
Matthew chapter 18, verse 21. Speaking about Peter speaking to Christ. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents, and since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused, and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your hearts. So there we are, slightly longer reading than we normally do, but I thought it was a good one today. So we're going to go on and talk about forgiveness. It's been a theme in the news this week. But of course we have Christ. I mean, in some ways we don't even need to say anything about that because the story that Christ tells is so illustrative of the point he wants to make, which is essentially that God offers us forgiveness. We know that God offers us forgiveness through Christ, through the sacrifice of Christ on the cross for us, through his perfect life laid down. And as a result of this grace, we ought to extend forgiveness and mercy to other people who wrong us, as we pray in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. There's that logic whereby we extend to other people the kind of grace that God has extended to us. Easier said than done, of course, but that's the sort of transformative logic of the gospel. So, yeah. What do you want to add anything to that, Tom?
I mean, we sort of haven't really mentioned about the reopening, have we? Which is also quite interesting numbers going on there. So the whole context of it, how many times should I forgive my sin? And Peter already says 7 times.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the Jewish number of completeness. So Peter's already saying, essentially, the forgiveness should be offered. It's not again and again and again and again. It's not saying 7 times. 7 is a special number. Jesus says then not 7 times, but 77 times. So even doubles up that number. And this idea that the forgiveness offered to us in heaven is of an order of magnitude more than we can manage, and that we're supposed to try and reflect that in our lives as well. So by forgiving people, there's a difference, of course, between forgiveness and justice, I guess. Does forgiveness always mean that you don't have justice? I think we might talk about this in a bit, so leading on. But is it possible to forgive from the heart and still see someone be punished? I think yes and no, isn't it? Because in this case, of course, the debt is completely forgiven, and there's no punishment for the forgive. But in other cases, maybe it's appropriate that we do. That people still, even with forgiveness, we still expect some sort of punishment. I don't know. What do we say about that? Because one thing is we're sort of going to talk about Charlie Kirk here, aren't we? And moving on into it. And one of the things I've seen, Tom Harwood, I think, on Twitter saying, well, let's start with the story first, shall we? Which is that Erika Kirk, who's Charlie Kirk's wife, widow, at his funeral, sort of expressed her forgiveness towards the shooter. As did a number of people, with these very Christian messages of reconciliation, forgiveness, hope, and love. And then, of course, nonetheless, the state is seeking the death penalty against him because in Utah, where the killing happened, this sort of crime the state requires life for a life. Which of course is perfectly accordant with the Bible. It doesn't. There's no particular reason to take a anti-death penalty position on the Bible. God commends it in part of His law, and He also commends it in Romans 13, the sword. So the question is, and then of course we have Trump coming in and not offering that message of forgiveness. Do you want to comment, Jamie? Have I rushed ahead too far? Or have
no, well, that's fine. I mean, I think that's a good sort of overview of the issue. Should we have a listen to a little compilation here? So this is talking about the Charlie Kirk funeral, which was a long funeral. It's 5 hours long or something like that. I can't say I've watched all of it, but obviously the main talking points, I think, from a kind of theological perspective, well, there are many actually, but yeah, I think it's certainly around forgiveness.
I mean, it's one thing that's been great is the gospel that was spoken by so many, elected officials, isn't it? There was a firm understanding of the gospel by so many of the higher, the forgiveness aside, the gospel is expounded by all sorts of people with all sorts of power within the American state, which is a wonderful thing to see.
Let's have a listen to this, shall we?
Let's have a listen,
and then we can talk about some of
the staff member texted him that there were many critics and students who were opposed to his views. Charlie wrote back to the staff member saying, I'm not here to fight them. I want to know them and love them, and I want to reach them. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erika. But now Erika can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right.
Okay, so that's Trump. Those are Trump's comments, and then there was
So I think partly, I would partly say, I think he was playing for laughs a little.
Yeah, it's a strange kind of.
There's this ripple of laughter, isn't there? Like, I don't know, is he being slightly comic? I don't know.
There is a sort of like humorous element, and sorry, there is one more thing I just want to listen to, if that's okay, which is more of a kind of compilation. So let's listen to this as well. This is there's an advert. Oh, sorry about this.
No.
I queued all this up. I queued this up perfectly. You heard how that other one came out perfectly.
Yeah, it was great.
I can skip the advert. I can skip it. Right, let's listen. Let's listen to this one. So this little compilation. So this is just talking about the huge crowds that attended this funeral in Arizona. Lots of images of thousands of people in this massive stadium. And then we're going to hear some audio clips in a moment. Lots of people with pictures of Charlie and with placards saying never surrender and things of this sort. Trump there sitting next to Elon Musk, shaking his hands. Various other...
My friends, for Charlie, we must remember that he is a hero to the United States of America, and he is a martyr for the Christian faith.
There was no pain, there was no fear, no agony. One moment Charlie was doing what he loved, and then he blinked. He blinked and saw his Savior in paradise. That man, that young man, I forgive him.
No side in American politics has a monopoly of disturbed or misguided people. As you know, the depraved assassin who planned and executed Charlie's killing has been arrested and charged with capital murder. God willing, he will receive the full and ultimate punishment for his horrific crime. It's a terrible thing. Everything we need to know about who Charlie Kirk truly was. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then Erika came on after that, and they embraced. That's the end of it. There's a video clip there.
I can't hear you, Jamie.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, then Erika came on, and they sort of had this embrace, Trump and Erika.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things that's worth saying is that like Erika's incredibly moving, like brave and wonderful moment there. You can hear the emotion. It was hard.
Yeah.
For her to do that, and she did it, and I think that's really powerful witness.
I sorry to interrupt. I sort of feel like the whole thing is sort of America on steroids, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like it's very, very big. 5 hours long, and all this crowd there and everything. And there is a kind of performative aspect to it, but that particular moment. Yeah, I agree with you. It's. I think you have to be extremely cynical and hard-hearted not to consider that, not to be very, very moved by that.
Yeah, it's moving, and I think the Trump. So first, there's sort of separate out some of the issues. So the first one is the state looking for the death penalty against the shooter, and actually, I think C.S. Lewis writes about this, doesn't he? In that should a Christian commit a capital crime, the expectation would be. For whatever reason that they whether they committed one in a previous life or whether they had a moment of deep sinfulness as a Christian, does happen. Even in a world with the death penalty, the expectation would be that they would go and hand themselves in and face that death penalty with courage and the knowledge of Christ as their savior. And I think there's truth in that, like that just because Erika's forgiven the shooter doesn't mean the state can necessarily let it go.
No, I mean, I agree with that. I think what Tom Harwood was saying was the question he was raising was how you can, as an individual Christian, I mean, I'm not even sure that Erika Kirk has said this, but how an individual Christian could be in favor of the death penalty in this case and yet offer forgiveness, or at least you might say by implication charity, as having a charitable attitude towards somebody like this, which is a good question. I think there is something somewhat paradoxical about it, isn't there? I freely admit that. I do believe in the death penalty. I think nowadays it's not really. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm not thought this through perhaps as much as I should have done. But I think it's probably not necessary to do it that much nowadays because of our prison system. But I think that in the case of really premeditated, clear, premeditated, unambiguous murder, I do think it should be enacted in certain circumstances. Yeah. I think there can also be mercy, but I think in this case, I also think, in the case, I know we had the conversation about like age, but I also think in the case of like child murder with people like Axel Radicabana, I would feel even more strongly about that. I think that Romans 13 is very, very clear, talks about the governing powers executing vengeance in the name of God. So on that kind of judicial level, on that sort of state level, that is appropriate. But on the kind of individual level, we are called to forgive our enemies. Yeah. So there is something sort of paradoxical about having an attitude of forgiveness towards someone and love, but at the same time thinking that it's the right thing that person is executed. So sorry, Karen.
I think that was the point that Lewis is making. Like you can, you can even, a Christian would be expected to follow the laws of the land, even up to to dying justly. And one of the points that I guess you'd make is that that this life is not the end of the Christian's life, and neither is it the end point of those who are not Christian, although their end point will be that everyone comes before the judgment of Christ.
Yeah, but again, that would be slightly paradoxical, wouldn't it? Because if you were thinking, well, this guy's going to be executed, an unrepentant murderer, then he's going to face the judgment of God. You're kind of sending him to that judgment, or willing him to be sent to that judgment, aren't you? Do you see what I mean?
But I mean, I guess, even in there'll be plenty of time for that person to be exposed to the gospel and turn to Christ.
Yeah.
In the next few years, as they wind their way towards the whatever punishment the state deals out,
there is something, I think, that it's not a black and white issue. I mean, I guess what I'm against is the notion that the death penalty is always wrong. I don't think it's necessarily always wrong. I think in some cases appropriate. Like I saw, for example, John Milbank saying, well, what about this young man's family? And that is a legitimate consideration, but I think it also cuts both ways, because I think it also shows respect to the family of the families of the people who've been murdered, and when somebody is executed for premeditated murder. So in this case, all right, you might show mercy to this guy who killed Charlie Kirk partly because you want to show mercy to his family, but then there's an implication for Charlie Kirk's family and all the other families that are affected by the murder as well on there. So I think it's just there are a lot of things to consider from a kind of ethical perspective. So there's that stuff. I think one of the things, and we're going to talk more about this thing about sort of conservatism or populism and Christianity. I mean, obviously you saw quite a lot of overlap there. JD Vance gave a particularly Christian speech as well, where he spoke about various things to do with Charlie Kirk, but then also particularly he spoke about his own faith and how he's had lots of an opportunity to speak about his faith in public, much more than normal as a result of what's happened. Vance also spoke about forgiveness, but Trump, as we heard, very much didn't. I think that's a clear repudiation of a Christian ethic there from Trump. And I don't think anyone can seriously sort of say that Trump is
Christian. No.
A Christian leader.
Does anyone seriously say that? Have we ever?
I think quite a lot of people say that, or think he's kind of semi-Christian.
Well, semi-Christian. I mean, possibly semi-Christian. I mean, the other thing is that not. Where he's coming from is kind of pagan, victorious kind of perspectives. I want to see my enemies suffer. Mind you, King David would probably said the same thing. But
it's quite an extreme thing to say for the president, though, isn't it? Sorry to interrupt, but he's talking about his own people, and really consider it's always. This is something I have noticed actually in the last week. Some responses to this from the right or from the conservative side of things, which I just think is more, these things are more redolent of the left normally, and it does trouble me because somebody like I heard Lord Monckton talking about the difference between the politics of hate on the left and the politics of love on the conservative side, and he was particularly talking about how Margaret Thatcher was actually animated by love for her people, and she wanted to make things better for everyone. I think that has to be the attitude. Yeah, it can't be, we're just going to take over and then we're going to destroy our opponents. And let's be our people.
And let's be really clear, because I don't think it's necessarily just a left-right thing, because I think, for example, there's a great and deeply authentic tradition of left-wing love. The sort that came out of the Welsh, and I think the Labour Party do not show this anymore, and that it tends to have been destroyed. But the sense of I had a great uncle or great grandfather, I can't remember, who was a union man, and he hurt himself very badly because he climbed up onto the factory's roof unauthorized and was cleaning the windows. To get light into the people working in there, cleaning the skylights, and fell through one. I think there's a sense in which there is a self-sacrificial love in that labor in that early labor movement coming out of and you see it in some of the greats of the past years. Not many of them in this government, unfortunately. But I'm thinking Tony Benn. I wouldn't mischaracterize his politics as a politics of hate or envy. I would necessarily, that's not to say I agree with his aim or how he would let it out. Like, I just think that there are good, honourable, and true, even if I disagree with them, traditions on the left, which.
I think that the terms left and right aren't necessarily very helpful here. I think most people who go under that kind of nomenclature on the left nowadays tend to be progressivists or socialists / communists. And I do think that most of the time those people are animated by the politics of envy and the politics of hatred, at least in the public square nowadays. But I do agree with you, it's not always the case. When somebody, there's plenty of leftism in the past which has been animated by a desire to help the poor, for example. But it seems to be quite easily translated into identity politics. That's the thing. And it happens on the other side. It happens on the other side as well, of course, as we're seeing here. And one of the things I wonder about now, which is kind of a new thought for me, and I'm basically saying this because I heard Louise Perry saying it, is because what I thought previously, and I still sort of do think this, is that on the right, somebody said this to me in email actually, on the right you play the ball rather than the man, but on the left you play the man rather than the ball. Now that's kind of what I used to think. Obviously it's quite simplistic. And what I mean by that is that, people on the right / conservatives, let's call them, tend to be more interested in ideas and, debate. And on the left, it tends to be more about, slagging people off and accusing people of various things and all that kind of stuff. But what Louise Perry said in her podcast is she wonders whether the right takes that kind of line because it's not been in power. It's not been in a position of cultural dominance. And that as we see the right or the conservative side emerging as the dominant cultural power, people are now feeling more free to express their contempt for the other side and their desire to dominate and destroy them.
I don't know. I think it's always... So this is one of the reasons why I am sceptical about reform at the moment, as they currently are. And I think they need a lot of work on them, is because we are seeing a particularly kind of spiritually empty form of right, of right-wing politics coming to the fore, I think. And we see it in Trump with that desire to destroy. It's a very human desire, but and I think this is where we can say there's a space for some old categories to be reinvented. Like there's the old Tory Whig, they'd all be on the right wing now, compared to, but there's possibly that's one way of looking at it. But what are we trying to do as Christians in politics? We're trying to preserve a Christian order, and that's preserving why do we want to do that? Because we think that Christian order is better than pagan order, as in the world view that we espouse, if played out on a political level, would be a better sort of world than alternatives, should we say? On the whole, not necessarily in the specifics, because people fall and are flawed and do bad things. I just fear that we're seeing a sort of a right-wing answer to the left-wing progressivists coming out to the fore, which is kind of morally bankrupt already, and that reform really need to be engaged with. And the church is doing a really bad job of engaging with reform. It's hectoring and lecturing and ignoring and hoping it'll all go away and that we'll all be, all the, good old middle-class kind of Guardian readers will get back in charge at some point. And that's not good enough. We need to actually listen, understand, and engage with where these people are and tell them where they're wrong and tell them where they're right.
Well, I think it does actually sort of raise the question of an opportunity to Christianize politics, doesn't it? And it's very there's a very sort of subtle temptation here. I was thinking about yesterday, which is the temptation to use Christianity in order to promote a certain type of politics. That's different to That's different to looking at, say, a party like Reform and saying there's a lot of good stuff here, but really it needs some kind of ethical basis grounded in Christianity in order to stop it becoming something that's stop it becoming something that's not benign, something that it could actually be a vehicle of of malice or even evil. That's a very different thing. It's just there's a subtlety to it. Can I just? I think this is a good opportunity to actually raise Elizabethanian,
Yeah.
aka Sam's question. So he asked this on our Patreon, but I'd like to read it out here. And if you just give me a minute here, Tom, because I'd like to just explain this question. I've actually even written myself some notes so that I do it clearly. So he wrote, be interested to hear thoughts about the Kirk Memorial event, in particular, A, whether we are seeing what the US right will look like after Trump, and B, whether the US will be able to avoid a Girardian scapegoating mimetic crisis. You may need to explain what this means to listeners. For me, I found the difference between Trump and everyone else giving speeches quite striking. So we've kind of spoken a bit about that A1, haven't we?
Yeah.
On the second one, and I do think this is a really important point. So just to explain, Sam is there referencing René Girard, who is a French philosopher and theologian. He's referring to Girard's theory of mimetic desire. And just, very simply, Girard he basically says we copy what others want. We don't just want things in society, but we see other people wanting things and then we copy those things. And this kind of creates an exacerbating effect where everybody
Feedback loop. Yeah.
Yeah, feedback loop where everybody starts wanting everybody in a particular category starts wanting the same thing with increased levels of what would you say with increased levels of desire, let's say. So it leads essentially to rivalry and to rage and social disharmony. And you can see how this is being exacerbated via social. I mean, sometimes I think this is exaggerated, but via social media, via algorithms, and so on and so forth. We see other people wanting certain political outcomes, lower immigration or better infrastructure, or on the left, other things, and then we want those things. We take on those desires ourselves, and then we kind of G each other up in that sense, and it kind of creates this momentum. Girard then said that this is resolved through scapegoating, which is very much as it sounds like. You've all developed this desire. There's a problem. You project that desire and that sort of sense of there being a problem onto a particular outsider. So, I mean, the very obvious thing to say is that on the conservative right, the potential outsider is the immigrant or immigrants. On the left, it would be, the white, patriarchal, male, heterosexual. And then you say that outsider needs to be sacrificed in order to obtain the desire that's wanted. Further to this, Girard also said that Jesus exposes this dynamic by being a kind of innocent scapegoat. So Jesus almost acts like a kind of circuit breaker. So the same kind of thing happens around Christ. Jesus gets chosen as a scapegoat. He gets murdered. He gets crucified, and then we recognize this dynamic. And in recognizing it, we sort of repent of it and come to see things differently. And that's that's where sort of I suppose that's forgiveness and reconciliation, all those kind of things come in. So the gospel ultimately is the way that this can change. And I think there's a lot of truth in what Girard is saying, and I do think it's applicable to this situation. And you can absolutely see it, in Erika's like she's the one. Vance did it to a certain extent as well, acting like the circuit breaker in that sense, like saying, we need to forgive, we need to offer mercy. Whereas Trump is like, I mean, it's very, very interesting, isn't it? He's like, well, this guy needs to die, he needs to be killed, but then I also hate my enemies in general. So it's like, well, it's not just enough that we have this guy. It's actually we need to find all the other people who are our opponents, and we need to destroy them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I push back slightly about the finding the outsider and reject, as a kind of because did you see Nigel Farage has actually said that he's going to start. If reform come in, they will make people reapply for visas even if they had settled status.
Right.
I don't know if you saw this. So
No, I didn't actually. I haven't seen this.
So he's saying that a lot of people out there who have got permanent right to remain, and in one way or another, he's going to decouple that going forward. Even if you've been settled here and have had settled status, and so you're going to have to continually apply for visas in order to remain working here. If obviously, I don't think I'll be able to do anything about people who have actually got citizenship. But a lot of people haven't. They've just got permanent right to remain. Their children may well have citizenship, of course, which complicates matters. And this is one way of sort of, he says, removing sort of, and I guess Girard might see this as kind of a scapegoating thing. It'll get rid of them, and then everything will be fine, right? But equally, there is actually an issue here with what's affordable, what's both culturally and economically to integrate. Like, can we integrate the millions of people we brought in a safe way? And if not, is Farage's solution not scapegoating? It's a sensible solution to a problem of limited capacity for cultural. And I think genuinely, I think if we don't think about this, then we could end up in a very nasty place, because our culture is being asked to do something which is akin to what was happening to, say, the Greek culture of Asia Minor in the 6th and 7th centuries as the Turks came in, or complete cultural change.
I agree with this.
Economically, we've got another people who are actually, some immigrants do very well, of course, and there are various ones we need to support at the moment, our health service, etc. But the problem is when we have an unproductive immigrants coming in who are then just kind of basically on the public purse here, and they're costing an awful lot of money. So is that scapegoating? I don't think it necessarily is. I think there's an issue there. So and of course the Church of England will almost certainly turn around and another sort of 5 or 6 bishops will write a letter denouncing Farage's racist proposals to send people back to their home countries.
So they're arguably identifying something as scapegoating, which isn't necessarily so.
So that's what I'm saying. Wondering.
I suppose the thing is with the Girard thing is it causes us to just interrogate those views and be cautious that's not what we're engaged in, but we are. I honestly think the Lord Monckton politics of love thing is really, really helpful, because I think if you ask yourself the question, like, if you were in charge of the country, how would you love best the people that you are responsible for? That's a really good question. And it may involve a certain level of immigration, but it wouldn't probably involve the level of immigration and the way it happens currently. And of course, we've spoken before many times about the analogy with the household. It's like, I'm responsible for my wife and children. I don't just open the front door and just let anyone walk in. I have to be discerning about it. So I think that's the way you've got to think about it. And I think the Girardian thing, it provides a sort of, as I say, a sort of something, a sort of framework to interrogate those views. In terms of the US stuff, I'm sort of, I guess you can see, like Sam implies, you can see different approaches, can't you? You can clearly see. I mean, JD Vance is like 30 years younger than Trump, or he might even be slightly more than that. So you can kind of see, well, Trump is very much, at least in terms of that speech, it's very much, let's destroy our enemies. Vance more conciliatory. So I think, Vance offers a much more sort of obviously Christian perspective, and maybe that's a good thing for the future.
I just do worry that Vance is going to be, we'll have to see. Like, is there going to be a big backlash against Trump? I don't know.
Well, possibly. I mean,
could Vance be caught in that backlash, and possibly, but
things are so polarized in the US. I mean, I don't really know anything about the polling data at the moment, but yeah. Can I just read this other comment? I didn't copy and paste the name, but this is also from our Patreon. Interested to hear your thoughts on Charlie Kirk's memorial. I found it really positive, and I love it that a muscular Christianity is rising in the US. compare and contrast with the C of E, irreverence accepted. However, at the same time, my natural reservedness finds the hands in the air adoration on display at American evangelical services rather disconcerting and off-putting. Should I just get over myself and embrace it? So much better than the death cult that seems to be in charge in the UK and here in Australia. So yeah.
So just go for the very ancient, very traditional Orandist position, and you'll get away with it. That's that one, isn't it? Yeah.
Aramus,
that's the one. Aramus.
Yeah, less is pray. Yeah.
That's an ancient Christian tradition. There,
hands extended to the side.
You
don't need to be charismatic to enjoy more sort of more muscular or orthodox forms of Christianity. We wouldn't see much of that kind of thing in my church. Probably wouldn't see an awful lot of that kind of thing in your churches, would you, Tom? I wouldn't have thought.
Waving hands around.
Yeah.
Only from me.
Hand waving. I'm only joking. I'm not making fun of anyone. I just find it funny.
Well, you just raise your hands in the Eucharist, don't you? That's kind of addressing God.
Yeah, but it's different to the kind of charismatic worship fest where everyone.
It's the same idea, isn't it? It's a moment of addressing God. So you raise your hands to address God.
Yeah, but it's not like a spontaneous action of the entire laity as it is in the charismatic, and there is a different feeling to it. There's a much more kind of ordered liturgical feel to it when you as the celebrant do it, isn't it? I mean, it's a different kind of thing. It's less a kind of spontaneous expression of your emotion or whatever. So yeah, I wouldn't be so down on Christianity in the UK. I think there are forms of more muscular Christianity that are emerging, and I think that the quiet revival stuff is real. Definitely, these kind of people are being attracted to churches, up and down the country, and I think there are loads of good examples of that in Britain, in England, and I think that's it's great. It's not necessarily the sort of charismatic evangelical US style either. I think it could very well become based mainly around Church of England churches. So I think in that sense, it's positive. Of course, there's different strands in the Church of England, and the episcopate is still very much one particular way that we would want to see probably change. But even so, there's a lot of good stuff happening here. I don't know about Australia, but yeah.
Australia is. They've got a great new bishop, haven't they?
Rick Thorpe.
Yeah, wonderful.
Really?
I think it's great. It's just gone to, was it Melbourne? No. Where's he gone?
I don't know, somewhere.
Anyway, I loved that the Diocese of Sydney are being very robust around these new laws around conversion therapy. I don't know who saw that. They said that they're going to be, that's a great, Orthodox diocese.
So basically it's making it illegal to pray for people if they ask to be prayed for, they're, same-sex attracted. It's illegal to pray for them even if they ask for it, basically.
Yeah, and even illegal to pray, for example, for abstinence, things like that, but the Diocese of Sydney have been, very strong in rejecting this, and have said that they'll go to the wall for people who are arrested for it. So they said keep going, and we'll be with you.
Nice.
So yeah,
that's the kind of response you really need from the church with things like this.
Yeah,
that's good. I don't think there's anything massively else that we need to cover in terms of the Charlie Kirk funeral.
No, we've got a few other sort of bits and bobs, don't we? We've got the Tommy Robson March.
Yeah, let's talk about that now. So, I mean, I thought it'd be interesting just to sorry, I've just got a cookies notice. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the letter that was written by church leaders condemning the march. I mean, what a surprise. Are you surprised, Tom? I'm not surprised. No. Dozens of senior church leaders. So this is a big march that happened, Unite the Kingdom march that happened in London, central London, on Saturday this week. And Tommy Robinson was one of the organisers. Anyway, let's just read this article. Dozens of senior church leaders have come together to condemn the co-opting and corrupting of Christian symbols, that's in inverted commas, at Tommy Robinson's far-right march in London last week. far right, of course. In an open letter seen by the Mirror, a group of bishops and Christian leaders wrote, "We are deeply concerned about the co-opting of Christian symbols, particularly the cross. During Saturday's Unite the Kingdom rally, many individuals and communities felt anxious, unsettled, and even threatened by aspects of the march. Onlookers saw wooden crosses and images of Christ on flags being carried by protesters. Acknowledging the, quote, diverse motivations for the march and the right to free speech, the clerics and Christian academics added, however, this rally included racist, anti-Muslim and far-right elements. As Christians from different theological and political backgrounds, we stand together against the misuse of Christianity. The cross is the ultimate sign of sacrifice for the other. Jesus calls us to love both our neighbors and our enemies and to welcome the stranger. Any co-opting or corrupting of the Christian faith to exclude others is unacceptable." The letter was signed by bishops of Winchester, Southwark, Manchester, Bradford, and Croydon.
It's weird because like Southwark, Manchester, Bradford, and Croydon are all kind of quite woke bishops, aren't they? And then you've got Winchester, who, in theory, you'd expect more of.
Yeah, let me just finish this. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, senior figures in the Methodist, Baptist, and Evangelical churches. One of whom is Steve Chalk, I noted. Then various other people. The letter concluded, "As Christian leaders, we are proud of our country and commit ourselves to work with others, building a more united kingdom where the values of love, humility, and compassion shine through in every community, and we do so unapologetically in the name of Jesus Christ." So there's that stuff there. We won't read the letter in full. I think we get the.
So I mean, it's a bit of a non sequitur, really, to say, this middle bit where it says, there are diverse motivations for the march. Okay. And they say, they do give the right to free speech. Well, that's nice. However, this rally included racist, anti-Muslim, and far-right elements. Well, far-right's undefinable. So we've got these racist and anti-Muslim that they're really worrying about. But I mean, in a sense, do you get how many letters of distaste do you get written by bishops for the Palestinian action? Marches which contain, I'm sure, racist, anti-Jew, and far left elements. They're always, but we, I mean, whataboutism doesn't really help the problem. But
well, I mean, but it does to an extent, Tom, because in this case, what you've just said, it illustrates the fact that there are always nutters who go on marches.
Yeah. There always is
necessarily characterize the whole march, does it?
So, are they saying that those who are carrying the cross, these people who are, wooden crosses, images of punks, are the same people, or are espousing racist, anti-Muslim, and far-right elements, or are they just people with diverse motivations who have a right to free speech and are worried about, is there a sense that they're co-opting, corrupting of the Christian faith to exclude others. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, if I could just comment here. There's this for me. You've highlighted one of the things I picked up on, but the other thing was when Jesus calls us to love both our neighbors and our enemies, and to welcome the stranger, right? And then just before that, it says the cross is the ultimate sign of sacrifice for the other. So the subtext there is that the implication of the cross is to have a liberal immigration policy. Which I think, and then they say any co-opting or corrupting of the Christian faith to exclude others is unacceptable. But I think they're co-opting the Christian faith for their political agenda by implication. So, they're doing a very similar thing, which is they're saying like the Christian faith implies this to these people. So I don't, there's not necessarily anything wrong with doing that either. I just think it's kind of slightly hypocritical. And I think to say that because Jesus calls us, Jesus calls us to welcome the stranger. I mean, what does that mean? Does he call us to do that in the way that they are implying, which is to have, high levels of immigration and just not to worry about it?
Yeah.
Does he do that? I don't think that's clear at all. I don't think it's clear.
No, I don't think it's easy to co-opt.
Think about this.
No, I don't think it's easy to co-opt him to any particular position on this. I mean, for one thing, go back to Augustine and the order of love. Like we have limited resources and we are expected to use them justly and to help others, but we start by helping those who are nearest to us, like
Well, those we have responsibility for.
Yeah. And the question is whether there's a real a real problem in our resources being used to sort of when we have our our own problems sort of unreservedly on other people's problems. And there is a question there, isn't there? There is definitely a question that the bishops don't bother to engage with, or whoever.
Well, what they do say, and this isn't in the main article, but I should probably read this out just to be fair. They say, we also understand that for many of those involved in the rally, there is a deep sense of frustration at feeling unheard and forgotten in the democratic process. We know that we cannot heal this wound unless the church and society as a whole rises to do more to address the issues of poverty, inequality, and exclusion. But even that, I think, is quite. It's like they are trying to acknowledge that there's a problem, but then they just fall back into this language of, DEI. Basically, it's I wouldn't say that these people, that the problem here is that they want to address necessarily poverty, inequality, and exclusion. I think it's an identity issue. It's that people feel that their identity is under attack and their identity is being eroded, and intentionally so by an elite class of politicians and academics, and frankly, people like the authors of this letter.
Yeah,
that's the issue. Inequality is not to do with inequality. That's just the language of DEI, isn't it? Sorry, Tom.
And I really wonder what letter they would have written to say, like I say, let's try the church in Philemon or something, or Ephesus, or Corinth.
Do you mean Philippi?
I do mean Philippi. Sorry, yeah, Philemon is different. The church of Philippi, these not Corinth, but the other two, which are Asia Minor churches, as the Turks sort of displaced and removed Christianity from their land, would they be writing the same letter? I mean, what would they have said to them? Oh, the cross is the ultimate sign of sacrifice for the other. Jesus calls us to love everyone, so convert to Islam and pay the price, in the name of love. Let's be honest, because that's part of the question, isn't it? It's like, is there a serious demographic problem that we need to engage with, and ignoring it and just pretending that we can just say, well, we just need to love everyone, is not going to help engage with it.
Yeah, I find it to be a very. I have to say, I think this letter is poorly argued, and it's not as bad as it could be, but it's not a great letter at all. And I don't really see what the point of it is. Should we listen to this was Trevor Phillips talking about this, and people may have heard this clip already because it's gone round.
Yeah, he was, of course, Trevor he was once the director of the race. What did he do? He was in the Labour government, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's listen to it.
Yeah. Of the marches were. I spent an hour or two amongst them, and my own impression was that they were mostly the sort of people you'd meet in a country pub or in half-time queue for the loo at football or at a concert. There was a sprinkling of black and brown faces, and the event was brought to a close by a gospel group singing Jerusalem. All that must worry the traditional mass parties, Labour and Conservatives, now polling at less than 40% between them. They're draining support to parties like Reform and the Greens. And yet, a man recently out of jail, condemned as an extremist thug by most mainstream media outlets, can rally a demo the size of the entire population of Cambridge or Blackpool. A feat you couldn't imagine either Sir Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch pulling off anytime soon. Perhaps the people are sending us all a message. Let's see if anyone at Westminster's listening.
Yeah, or indeed, I would add the bishops of the Church of England. I mean, that's the thing as well, is a question of whether this march was actually disorderly in the way that people are implying, in any way that was unusual. Yes, there were arrests, but there were arrests at every march, including the pro-Palestinian marches that we've seen in recent months, and also, of course, the BLM marches, which were, seemingly far more disorderly. And you don't get, as you say, Tom, quite rightly, you don't get the bishops condemning these things, and you just think, well, why don't they condemn them? It's because they are leftist causes.
Because they agree with them,
Yeah, because this is a right-wing cause. And so that's just the way it looks. I think to be honest with you, I think that's the way it is, but it's definitely the way it looks. And also, you listen to somebody like Trevor Phillips, he actually bothered to go there and to see what it was like, and he's come out with this assessment. I've heard various different assessments from people who were there, some more critical, some not so critical. I do have concerns about. I do have concerns, as I said earlier, about the kind of co-opting of Christianity, for any political cause. I think there's a subtlety to it,
But
which
there's also the inconvenient truth that our national flag is the Christian cross. So there's kind of part of that, isn't there, going on here? They're not necessarily all of them claiming it for Christianity. They're claiming it for a British English identity.
yeah,
and that muddies the waters somewhat.
yeah. As Trevor Phillips said, they did have a gospel presentation there. They had. I actually know somebody who was there who saw this happening. So there's kind of gospel presentation. I think it was by like a Welsh guy, but then they had some New Zealanders doing the haka, and apparently there was some tearing apart of flags. So tearing apart the LGBT flag, and the tearing apart the Palestinian flag, and it sort of seemed like this was actually part of the sort of official goings on, if you see what I mean. So there's stuff like that where you just think, well, I'm not really. Tommy Robinson, he's a bit like Trump. You might have sympathy for a lot of things he says, but at the same time, he's not a Christian figure in any way, really. And so, one doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I kind of need to think this through a little bit more. But there is this question about the interplay of Christianity and conservative or right-wing politics, which. Yeah, I think it's possible that the right can co-opt Christianity in the same way that the left can do so.
Oh, yeah.
Can be illegitimate.
I mean, we need to be careful about that. But one of the problems is, of course, that the bishops only ever speak in one direction.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah.
And
it's not subtlety. There's no subtlety of engagement, and I don't want to big us up. At least we're trying to think through the issues in a way which is slightly deeper. Rather than just going, oh yeah, the left, they're terrible. I mean, we do a lot of that, to be fair, but do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, to be fair, Jamie, we is probably unfair at that point. I was, yeah.
What do you mean?
No,
I do.
Well, we should get into our letter, really, which addresses that, doesn't it? Because I think the last time we spoke,
yeah,
but,
we've got another couple of stories to talk about first, if that's okay.
Okay,
quickly, so let's do it quickly, because then we'll get into a letter, because I know we've got 20 minutes. But let's do this is basically a similar thing, isn't it? So the thing about the bishops, the other thing that's happened this week is that they've welcomed Britain's recognition of Palestine as a state. So again, Bishop of Southwark, again, involved in this, various other people. The UK's recognition of Palestinian statehood has been welcomed by a group of bishops who said that it, quote, does not reward terrorism, but rather it undercuts extremist narratives and strengthens moderates.
I mean, does it? What moderates? I mean,
as they say, it sends a strong moral and political signal that this occupation is unjust. I went too far there. Despite having no immediate effect on the conditions in Gaza, recognition does, and this is a quote, I'm pretty sure from the bishops, offer all Palestinians the hope of a future free from occupation and violence, not only for them, but for all future generations. It sends a strong moral and political signal that this occupation is unjust and untenable and must be brought to an end through negotiations.
Right.
I mean, the language of occupation there, I just think is so unhelpful. It's just so unhelpful. It's just showing quite clearly, isn't it, what the bishops think, which is that they consider Israel to be like a colonialist occupying power. Sorry, Carrot, you were going to say something.
And I mean, and there's this real question about this sort of recognition. It gives them the hope of a just future. Well, they keep voting Palestinians, especially in the Gaza, keep voting Hamas in. In what sense is Hamas have declared victory thanks to this? Which they're always going to do. I mean, I just think there's internationally there are certain criteria that are expected of states for recognition, and Palestinian just barely achieves any of them. Palestine, because it doesn't have defined borders, it doesn't have defined who's in charge in the state of Palestine. And I know Keir Starmer wants to say, Hamas have no place in that, but they do, don't they? They're Gaza is surely part of Palestine, and that's where the Hamas are, and the Palestinian Authority don't seem to have any power there. So where are the borders? Who's in charge? It's just a political. I mean, one of the things I've seen, I think it's quite true, is that all this is not really about achieving peace in Gaza. It's about achieving peace in the Labour Party.
Yeah,
it's a bone he's thrown to the left wingers.
it's an absolute joke. It makes us look like a joke, I think, as a nation. The whole rationale for it was like, Starmer coming out and saying, if Israel doesn't do X, Y, and Z, then we will recognize Palestinian statehood, which is such a strange thing to say, isn't it? Because surely Palestine is either a state or it's not. Whether or not it's like, if you don't do this, we're going to say that Palestine's a state. It doesn't follow. It's complete non sequitur, and it makes us just, Israel. Well, Israel just think, obviously Netanyahu has condemned it, and it's just a joke, isn't it? I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
I think. One other thing then, so assisted suicide debated in the Lords first and second session since we last spoke. Various people have said stuff. Lord Frost gave a speech. He told us what he was going to say at our interview. Some other good speeches, apparently. I just wanted to flag up an article by Michael Deacon in the Telegraph, where he talks about a speech by Lord Brooke of Alverthorpe. He said, so I'll read a bit of this. He's a leading trade unionist, by the way, Lord Brooke. He said, since 2000, declared Lord Brooke, the total number of people in the world has soared, and bear in mind this is an argument in favour of assisted suicide, has soared from 6.1 to 8.2 billion, a 25% increase in 25 years. Just think what the 2025 numbers would be if abortion had not been legalised, or there had not been wide-scale usage and advocacy of contraception. Indeed, the growth of homosexuality throughout society has reduced the number of children that we would have had. Had the churches had their way, we would have had a very much bigger population than we presently have, facing the difficulties we have with climate change. And then, Michael Deacon says, well, what on earth has any of that got to do with assisted suicide? Surely he wasn't suggesting that assisted suicide would help tackle climate change by cutting our population, was he? But that's exactly what he was doing. It's actually that's, to me, that's like a quiet part out loud. So he's basically saying, so what were those issues? Abortion, contraception, homosexuality. These things are all good because they limit the population. And if we have assisted suicide, that will be one other good that will come in order to limit the amount of human beings on the planet. So that's why we should have it.
So like human hatred, isn't it? It's misanthrope. It's Malthusian misanthropism. Anyway.
So it's an extraordinary intervention there. And I mean, I think particularly the thing, just because it's so outrageous in our society to say the thing about homosexuality, but I mean, obviously, like abortion, I mean, it's utterly deplorable. But it does make you sort of wonder, doesn't it? If this is what lots of people are actually really thinking about, particularly on the kind of progressive left and the elite level.
Yeah. It was interesting, just as a sort of follow-up to that, because I was chatting to a member of the House of Lords, and he was telling me that that a lot of people obviously disappointed that the Lords passed it to committee stage, so it's not gone through a vote yet, and the vote hasn't been thought. Now he is saying that in committee stage is where they're really going to get their teeth into this and amend it, and but also probably it won't pass in this session. At which point it will go. He thinks the feeling within the House of Lords is that is inclined not to pass it, and thinks if it came to a vote that the House of Lords would vote it down,
right?
And that, but certainly they're going to try and talk it out in committee stage, just to avoid that kind of direct collision between House of Lords and House of Commons. But I mean, they're all very aware that the House of Lords is perfectly entitled to vote this down. It's not a government bill. It's not in the. It's not the budget. It's not. It's not in manifestos. It's a private member's bill, and the Lords can talk it out and vote it down if they wish. And he thinks there's still every chance they will.
Yeah,
it's most likely.
Yeah. I mean, look, well, that's good if that's true. I mean, Lord Frost said he thought it would be a kind of death by 1,000 cuts type thing, where it was amended and talked about so much that time ran out. Essentially,
yeah, that's what my source was saying. That's their plan anyway. That's plan A.
Plan A. Well, that would be good. I mean, it would be great if this thing got kicked into long grass and never spoken about again. All right, Tom.
Slightly depends on how many when the session ends. Anyway, yeah, because which is at some point in the sort of between Christmas and spring for the King's Speech.
Yeah. Well, let's hope and pray.
Yeah.
Right, we got to talk about our letter, which you seem to love so much for obvious reasons, Tom. I'm just going to say a quick plug for supporting the podcast. Please do support the podcast. Podcasts cost money to make. I am dependent on the money I make podcasting and writing, so a lot of it comes to me, quite frankly, and I need it to live. So you're really helping me, and you're helping us make the podcast. So please do support us. You get the episodes early. You get our bonus podcast on Uncollared. And as well, you also get the sense of satisfaction for helping, which is the greatest gift of all. Irreverentpod.com. Click on the big red button and become a Patreon today for as little as £2.50 plus VAT in the UK per month. It's almost nothing. You can buy us a coffee as well, or you can join us on Substack. That costs a £5 at irreverentpod.substack.com. You get all exactly the same stuff. Really appreciate it if you could do that. If you'd like to donate to us directly, you can also do that. Send us an email at irreverentpod@gmail.com, or indeed send us an email about anything else you'd like to comment on, any questions you have, anything you'd like to read out on the show. Really appreciate that. And we have an email to share now. Now, Tom, we've got about 10 minutes before you absolutely have to go. It's quite a long email.
Should we just cut it down to
Well, I think we can read the whole thing out. It's just my thing I was going to say is that if you read it out, you have a tendency to kind of comment as you go and turn it.
I won't comment, Jim. I won't comment.
Right, do you want to just read it then?
I'll read it. I'll just read it.
You can make one or two comments if you like.
I'm writing as a new listener. Welcome. Having just finished your most recent episode released 12th September discussing the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk and the political climate of the UK and the USA. After following the event, when all the commentary surrounding your message that Christian teachers say that when we disagree, we must do so with love, resonated with me. And it's in this spirit I hope this email finds you. I'm someone who is very much on the political left. I don't know what woke means, but I suspect it includes me. That said, I'm becoming increasingly concerned by rising political tensions and possibility of years of lead-style civil strife in a climate in which it is all too common to hear we have to do it to them before they do it to us from both sides. I must admit, I've never heard that. But
I don't know years of lead. I don't know what that means.
It's a quote, so presumably it's a book or a show.
Okay. Could be a typo, I suppose.
To my dismay, I personally know people who, in my opinion, crossed the line into celebrating Kirk's assassination. I was also shocked by the number of left-wing people I saw online doing likewise. So I have to agree with you that the conduct on the left as a whole has sadly fallen short. I would also have to agree that regardless of the motives of the alleged shooter, the left, myself including, need to be more careful to understand that many on the right come to their beliefs not out of hatred, but out of a genuine belief they advocate for what's right. You know, I don't think that you are woke, because this is not the sort of thing that a woke person would say. You're anyway.
It doesn't sound like the kind of delusional nonsense that comes out. Yeah.
To be fair, he says, I do believe this is a both sides problem. In the episode, I was surprised when Reverend Jamie Franklin said he could not think of any examples of violent or dehumanizing rhetoric from the right equivalent to that of the left calling conservatives Nazis. A few examples immediately sprung to my mind. Everybody from Keir Starmer to his left is repeatedly called a communist. The left are regularly called terrorists. I mean, they're not communists, are they? They're Marxists, but yeah, which is, to be fair, what they call themselves. The left are regularly called terrorist sympathisers, as Corbyn was by numerous elected Conservatives. I mean,
yeah. Tom, do you want to just read it? This is the bit where we
protesters for a ceasefire in Gaza were repeatedly identified as Hamas sympathisers by right-wing commentators. Every man my age, I'm of Generation Z, will have come across a YouTube video that has used the moniker feminazi. Across the Atlantic, Democrats are regularly called communists, baby killers, and Satanists, and this rhetoric has already had deadly consequences. 2 Democrat state lawmakers in Minnesota were killed in their home along with their dog, allegedly by a man with a list of pro-abortion advocates in his car. In this country, Joe Cox, a Labour MP, was murdered by a man with links to the organised far right, which I was somewhat baffled to hear Reverend Jamie claim doesn't exist, who shouted Britain first as he killed her. In fairness, I think that thanks to the efforts of echo chambers, it's far easier for any given person to remember wrongs committed by the other side. And I do not mean to say that the right is worse than the left in this regard. I'm not interested in questions of which side is worse. And if I were, I would not have any idea how one could come to an objective judgment. Rather, my point is, I think there's a deep malaise that exists in our world as a whole and not with a specific ideology. My feeling is that this malaise is a spiritual one. It seems to me that in our age, the enemy's greatest weapon is despair, in the depths of which a person may justify any action, no matter how diabolical. However, I know that Christ offers a true remedy to despair. Since I came to faith last year, I've experienced hope in a way that was never possible for me before. Thanks be to God. I pray that in the light of our great hope in Christ, feel free from the despair of the world, the church can be the light on the hill which demonstrates to all how we can disagree with love and understanding. If we as Christians can live in a community with people we disagree with in a way that would be considered largely impossible in the secular world, then I believe that many might see hope for our hope for themselves. God be with you and with your families and friends. Best wishes, Adam. Well, it's a nice email. Thank you, Adam. So I just think partly I think it's quite hard to defend Corbyn in this one, because I think he actually does sympathise with the Hamas terrorists and has said so himself, hasn't he? I mean, that's not. I
mean, he wouldn't say that about himself, but other people would say about him. Yeah.
I don't know, what has he said about? I mean, he said that he
wouldn't call himself a terrorist sympathizer. But no. I mean, to be honest, Tom, I think the point is, rather than picking it apart and going through all the examples, I think like the point he's making is that the argument he's making anyway is that this is both a left and right problem.
Yeah, which I do agree, which is what I argued 2 weeks ago.
Okay. I mean, my response is that I concede it to some extent, but not to a very great extent. I wasn't entirely prepared for the conversation last week, partly because the stuff with Charlie Kirk had just happened.
I think, Jamie, I've got to go. I think my meeting has arrived early.
Okay, well, I'll carry on then. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, God bless. Thanks. Bye.
Blessings. Just to say, carry on with that. I wasn't entirely prepared for it because Tom sort of sprung this kind of idea on me that this was kind of, this is a sort of equivalent both sides problem. So there was that. Partly I was sort of unready for it. So the key thing, no, sorry, I'm busy at the moment. Sorry. Sorry, someone just knocked on my door. It's all happening now. It's trying to prevent me from responding to this email. Adam, I think that some of these points are good. I think that you give good examples of the Democrat state lawmakers and Joe Cox. I do think that you include examples which are much more benign, and I wouldn't think there's any problem with calling somebody a communist. Communist is a political viewpoint that's not even got particular stigma attached to it in our society. So I retain the right to call people communists if I think that they espouse a communist ideology. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that's the equivalent of calling someone a Nazi. However, there clearly is name calling that goes on both sides. So I can see that to an extent. But where I do not think there is an equivalence is that I don't think, well, I mean, if you take the examples that you gave, like Joe Cox, all these lawmakers, I mean, the lawmakers, I'm not really familiar with that example, but with Joe Cox, there was precisely nobody online who was celebrating that or who was justifying it in any way. And that's very, very different to what you saw with Charlie Kirk. Now, as Tom said earlier, you don't sound particularly woke. You sound like a much more reasonable person than the kind of radical progressive left. And that's what I would say about this. I think there is a problem with a radical progressive left. And I don't think it's helpful to say, oh, well, there's an equal and equivalent problem on the right, because I just don't. Well, firstly, I think, well, even if there is, it's not necessarily relevant to the problem. It's whataboutism. You've got this problem, radical progressive leftism, which is ultimately hateful and violent and in some cases murderous. And I do think that's true. And I do think that's what we've seen. We should just talk about that and think about that. We don't have to say, oh, yeah, but it's a problem on the right as well. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But, we've got to be able to talk about these things without them being excused by people saying, well, there's an equivalent on the other side of the political spectrum. So I think that, but I just don't think that there is the equivalent problem on the right. And, this sort of far right idea, I mean, please write back, but somebody needs to explain to me what the far right actually is and where it's manifested in Britain. If the Unite the Right rally is far right, then the far right is fairly benign, isn't it? If you listen to what Trevor Phillips says, there's I can't think of, all right, but Joe Cox, an isolated individual, maybe he was, on the extreme right, but can are there other examples of, right-wing terrorism, manifestation of right-wing violence in Britain? I don't really see that. If the Unite the Right march is the greatest recent example of that, then it was, as I said, it was fairly peaceful. It was certainly more peaceful than BLM and the other example I gave earlier, which was the pro-Palestine marches. Also, there is the issue of, even with these marches, there's the issue of counter protests which come in and they cause trouble as well. So that's my sort of challenge is, I suppose, and genuine challenge is, what is the far right? What actually is it? Can you give me some examples of how it's manifesting in society? The thing with Joe Cox, obviously, it's horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And I completely take the point, but it was many years ago now. It was an isolated individual. We're not talking about thousands or tens of thousands of people who are promoting this ideology. We're talking about an isolated individual in Britain, and this was many years ago. With the Charlie Kirk thing, there are leftists everywhere celebrating this and justifying it. So that would be my kind of response. So I can see to an extent, I do think certain types of name calling are really unhelpful and can lead to hatred and even violence. And it's, that probably does happen both ways. I just think it's a way bigger problem for the progressive left. And I think that's manifested itself very plainly through the stuff with Charlie Kirk. So I think, so I hope that's okay for a kind of response. I'm really glad, by the way, that you found faith for yourself. And I agree with all the stuff you say about, the Christ being the hope and all this kind of stuff. Very happy for you to give a response as well. irreverentpod@gmail.com. So there we go. All right. I think it's been quite an interesting episode this week. Sorry, Tom had to leave early. It would have all worked fine if his meeting, whoever it was, mysteriously turned up early. But there we go. Thank you as ever for listening. Please do support us. Go to our website, irreverentpod.com, and support us. I really, really appreciate that. If you can possibly see a way to doing it, helps us continue, helps me to live. And send an email, irreverentpod@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of the show. All right. Well, actually, I should say a prayer, shouldn't I? That's what I was thinking. There's something else I should do, which is to say a prayer. So let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, give unto us the increase of faith, hope, and charity, and that we may obtain that which thou dost promise, and make us to love that which thou dost command, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Very fitting for such a day and such a podcast as this. Thanks very much for listening as ever. Till next time, keep watch and keep the faith.